Welcome to the Thrive Sister Thrive podcast. Thank you for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I thought it would be fun for us to have a chat because I know that I kind of intuitively have known for years that it was a healthy thing to bring the outdoors indoors, right? And a lot of us, I think, do know that. But there's a lot of I don't think we really understand why a lot of times. And obviously houseplants, which is your department, and planteriors, is that what you call it? Or is that the right word?
I like to call it planterior design.
Planterior design. That's so clever. I love it. And that is, I think a lot of us don't really understand why it's healthy. We just kind of know that's probably a good thing to do, but a lot of us also don't know how to do it, or we think it's expensive and time consuming. So we're going to get into that, some of those things later. But I thought it would be really fun to have a talk about that from a health and wellness perspective, what houseplants can do for us when we bring them into not only our homes, but even our workspaces for that matter. And so I thought, I know that there's a variety of ways in which it helps us physically and mentally, but I think a good place to start this off would be having you talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite parts of my job.
Oh, good.
To talk about the nerdy plant stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people, they gravitate toward plants, and as you said, they don't really understand why, and especially in the last year and a half, plant sales have skyrocketed.
Oh, really?
Specifically houseplants. Like I work specifically with indoor plants, houseplants, and sales of houseplants are absolutely skyrocketing. There's plant shortages everywhere.
Wow.
Because people are like building these massive plant collections. And whether or not we realize that there is something biological happening, there is a relationship between humans and plants. There's this concept, this theory called biophilia.
Okay.
Which is the idea that humans have an innate inclination to be in commune with nature.
Okay.
Maybe it's a primitive reason, maybe it dates back to the time when we lived outside, whatever that is, we as humans, we can't help but have a relationship with nature that is beneficial, whether or not we are aware of it.
Right. That sounds right to me. I think that's exactly right on the money. It's just deeply ingrained in us, even if we don't understand it. Right.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. You go.
I was just going to share that when we think about this idea, this theory of biophilia, and then we think about, biophilic design and where we have, plants incorporated into our interiors and our spaces, the whole idea is like, let's bring the outside inside.
Right.
We've heard of the trend of like forest bathing and going on a hike and feeling re-energized by nature. So there is this thing that humans do where they go out into the world and they take a walk in the woods or swim in the water and they feel recharged and re-energized. And so how can we, in this modern time that we live in our apartment buildings around all of these kind of fabricated materials and synthetic materials, how can we bring some of what is natural, some of what exists in the natural world into our homes so that we are not missing out on that human natural environment connection that is so important to humans?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's it's incredible too to see all of the interesting ways that that's happening now. There's just so many. If you're looking at that kind of stuff on Instagram or Pinterest or whatever, or even magazines and things, it's incredible the way people are bringing the outside inside, or even I guess in some situations if they have their own little balcony or these green roof situations on like high rises and stuff. It's incredible. It's so impressive, but obviously we are going to great effort sometimes to make this happen. There has to be something driving that, right?
Absolutely. There is science, there is biology that is behind it.
There is, and that's what I wanted to talk about just at least at a high level next. Like what is it that when plants are in our indoor environment, as an example, what are they doing in terms of like, what's happening there as far as what they're doing in the environment that's helping it that's making it more relaxing and just healthier in general? I know that they have some kind of like you said, this biological thing that's happening there. So can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, a little bit. Obviously one of the most straightforward benefits of plants is the physical benefit of plants clean the air, right? That is the most obvious kind of benefit, where we'll bring plants into a space and they do a really good job of eating up the things that are harmful to us.
So like the VOCs that are being off-gassed and that sort of thing? Okay.
Exactly. Or just as humans, we'll breathe in and then we'll breathe out. And when we breathe out, what is that, CO2?
Carbon dioxide.
Exactly. Plants will eat that up. Plants like that. So it's kind of the symbiotic relationship of we are creating for better, for worse, like an
we're creating the mess and they're cleaning it up.
But then plants in turn are like, oh, I'll take care of that. I'll take care of that. So that's probably the most obvious, right? There's this physical thing where plants clean the air, and that is wonderful and that is fabulous.
Okay.
But then there are these other physiological things that happen when we're around plants. Studies have found that plants can help reduce anxiety. They can make people feel less stressed. Some studies have found that plants introduced into an environment can make people more productive, right? Which kind of makes sense. Like if we're surrounded by plants and we're feeling less stressed, we may then in turn feel a little more productive.
And if they're giving us more oxygen or whatever, if they're putting more oxygen in the air, that's going to help your brain work a little bit better in all the ways. Yeah,
absolutely. There have been studies that have shown that when plants are introduced, real plants, not fake plants, when real plants are introduced into hospital environments and patients get to spend time near plants, not even necessarily interacting with them, but a plant on a bedside table or in your hospital room, those patients, there's a correlation between them healing faster when there is a presence of a living plant.
That's incredible.
So there's a real thing that is happening here. There's real biology and real science behind the relationship that we have with plants. And so then it's no wonder when we think to the last year and a half why so many people are collecting plants when they're spending so much time in their homes, sometimes alone. So not only is it satisfying, like maybe an innate need for somebody to care for something, caring for my plant collection, but then it's also like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. The plants are providing then those stress reducing, mood boosting, productivity boosting benefits to the inhabitants of the space, which is just really kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. And it's obviously a physical and, like you said, there's a physiological thing happening there. It's not just one thing that's happening. There's different things happening on different levels between us and plants. It's just
absolutely,
it's impressive, and it makes me happy to hear that so many people have bought houseplants in the last year. Now, hopefully they've learned how to care for them, because that's the second part. We'll talk about that a bit more later, because you can go buy them, but if you don't take proper care of them, the poor things aren't going to make it very far. But
exactly.
I was reading recently that there is, in fact, I'll link to it in the show notes. It was fascinating, but it was a study done by NASA, because apparently they study plant life quite a lot, because they have to figure out how to not only clean up these environments where these people are at, like even if they're in the space station or something like that, they have to try to make those environments livable, right? But also they need to figure out basically how they can bring nature around these people that are so oftentimes removed for such a long period of time, and they go into these biospheres and all these things, to like get ready. And so they've figured out that surrounding or bringing into these environments plenty of plant life not only keeps the air much nicer, because a lot of times those things are completely sealed off. So there's no ventilation happening like in our homes. There's a certain amount of ventilation when we're opening windows and doors and things like that. At least it helps, right? But you get into some of those environments and they're so extreme. So this whole study and I read sort of the short version of the article, but basically it was fascinating, because that they were finding that it was not only cleaning the air and providing oxygen and all of this, but again, the mental well-being and all of that. But they said, they even went so far as they stated in a report that they said, if humans are to move into closed environments on Earth or in space, we must take along nature's life support system, plants. And I thought, Well, there you go.
That's so beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like common sense, doesn't it? But our common sense gets away from us sometimes. So yeah, it's fascinating. It is fascinating. Well, now
and
that
what's so interesting too is that I think that that's exactly what's happening without people understanding that is why they're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, we're spending so much time cooped up indoors.
Yeah.
People are, maybe they don't understand that there is that relationship there or that innate need, but they are bringing plants into their space. So there's something subconscious that's going on. We're deep down in our the essence of our humanity. We do understand that this relationship is important.
We know that we evolved surviving around and on, eating plants, being surrounded by plants, being protected by trees. But, there's just this real strong pull towards them for a reason. Obviously, it's like you said, it runs deep, and it's so interesting that we do these things, we don't understand why we're doing them, and there's something really, really deep about why we do them. So it's kind of fun to figure out, well, of course, that's why I want to go buy a bunch of plants, especially if I'm feeling stressed or alone or, whatever the case is. That's another living thing in your environment that, you can interact with on some level,
Yes.
Yeah.
And so if anyone listening right now is looking for more justification to go out and buy more house plants, this is it.
This is it. Yeah. You don't need to feel bad about it.
Help feed your plant addiction.
Yes. So don't let anybody talk you out of it. It's okay to spend a little money on it. It's fine. It's going to make your life better in the long run. So
exactly.
Okay. Well, now that we've made this case for why someone should most certainly bring some plants into their workspace and their living space and all of that, I want to get into what I know I assume are some of the more common hurdles or concerns around people, newbies to the whole plant thing, bringing plants in the house. So I want to get into those in a second. Things probably along the lines of it could be expensive, it could be time consuming. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. But first, before I do that, I know you work with businesses as well as individuals, and I would love to know why some of what they've told you, why some of these businesses, different like spas and salons and whatever other kind of businesses you want to talk about, why they want to bring plants. Do they need to be educated, or is this something they're really on their own? Like, we just need this. This is what we need to bring in here. And why do they want to do it? And how do you support them with that?
Great question. I think that it's kind of twofold, right? Part one is, if I think about commercial spaces, so the lobby of a commercial office building, or let's say a coffee bar that wants to incorporate plants into their store concept. A lot of them, I think, foremost understand that there is a plant trend happening. There's a plant boom.
Yeah.
And so they understand that bringing plants into a space is more than likely going to be perceived as welcome or cool or on trend or familiar and comforting to the inhabitants of that space, right? Whether they're tenants coming into the office for the day who are passing by plants in the lobby and who are like, this feels good to be in here. Or they're people hopping over to their favorite coffee bar and they admire the plants every time they're there. So I think the first one is that the decision makers do understand that there's something going on with plants here, and people like plants. Plants make people happy.
Like, I don't know what it is, but I like it. They like it. I like it. I'm on board.
Let's give the people the plants.
Let's give them
right?
what they
want the plants. I think that the other part of it, and this is the part that I really love to play in, is that plants are living things and they are also design elements, right? So they are living additions to our internal environments. They are also things that we can style with, things that we can use to make a space feel warm or complete. So a lot of the clients I end up working with are like, we don't need to buy a big piece of art and put it on the wall here if we do a plant installation, or, we have all of these open shelves. Rather than fill them with things and trinkets and stuff, why don't we fill them with plants? So
such a much better idea.
I completely agree. I think it's a much better idea. And so now you're using plants because, yes, A, people like them, but also B, because they really are design elements and they can transform a space. They can make a lobby that feels cold and sterile and transactional all of a sudden feel inviting and like a place you want to spend your time in, or like a place that you're proud to walk through.
Yeah.
So there's, I think that's why a lot of my commercial clients see the benefits to using plants.
Yeah. Make it a more personable environment.
Yes,
and
make it more personable.
Yeah.
And the way that I end up working with a lot of these commercial clients is I will evaluate the space first.
Okay.
Because for me, that is first and foremost. Let's look at the floor plan. Let's identify high traffic areas.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the light availability. Which directions do the windows face in the space, right? What kind of light are we getting? Because all of those things help then back you into the types of plants that the space supports. Right. So I never want to introduce plants into a space if I know that they're not going to be happy there. It's first and foremost, what kind of environment are we dealing with? Mm-hmm. And then let's match the right plants to that environment.
Yeah.
And from there is all the fun stuff of picking out the materials, complementary textures, plants to go within the space, and installing them so that it feels very livable. Yeah. And it's something that is pleasant for both the inhabitants of the space, but is also something where the plants are going to be set up for success as well.
Right.
I care about the plants. I care about the humans in the space, and I also care about the well-being of the plants.
Yes, and I know that you do. It's very obvious when you follow along with you on Instagram. And of course, I took a couple of your workshops last year. I think it was early last year, and it's so obvious that you care about these little plants and you want them to survive. And I learned so much, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that makes sense. I think that's one thing a lot of times people don't think about is where are the windows and what do these certain plants like? It's just we think, well, these are indoor plants. They should do just fine wherever I put them. And that could not be more wrong. But I think that a lot of us, kind of, that's our thinking.
Absolutely.
So now and then once you set up the installations, do you then go and care for the plants always? I know you do that. You do go the care and maintenance do the maintenance on the plants, right? And then do you teach them what to do also, or how's that work?
Yeah, it's totally scalable. So for some clients, they might say, hey, can we keep you on to do plant maintenance, mm-hmm. which will then involve me coming on a cyclical basis mm-hmm. to water plants, clean leaves, rotate things, kind of do all of those preventative care best practices.
Sure.
Other times, if I'm working with a client out of state, mm-hmm. I might then pass off the maintenance piece to a local person who can take care of the plants. Or in other cases, I might be training on-site staff or personnel to care for the plants. And in that case, I would do kind of an in-depth tutorial with the person who's going to be taking on the plant maintenance, walk through when do we know when it's time to water? How do we know how much water to give the plant? Mm-hmm. Which plants need more water versus less water? How do we clean leaves? So we do all of those things. So we do all of those things where the person then who's going to take over the plant maintenance and the plant's care, they are set up for success. Yeah. And therefore the plants are set up for success. And
do you give them periodic phone calls? How are these plants doing, by the way?
Well, I was just going to say, I always offer like a 30-day period after it's installed. Like my client can call me up and say, hey, I noticed this, is that normal? Or, anything like that, just to be there to support that transition period between someone might have had not many plants and now all of a sudden they have a lot.
Right. Yeah. And also too, doesn't it, once you put a plant somewhere new, basically in a new environment, isn't it that first little bit of time where they get adjusted and if things are going to go sideways, they might go sideways in that early part, or it takes them a while to get established? Or is that just me and my my not so great, green thumb? But
no. I think that what you just described is a very common phenomenon. And one part of it is that, yes, usually when we bring plants home mm-hmm. From the nursery, they go through an adjustment period. And it makes a lot of sense if you really think about it, because the plant just came from the most ideal, climate.
Right.
The humidity was right. The watering was exact. The light availability was perfection. There was a full staff of people rotating at any given time to check the plant over and make sure it was getting what it needed.
Yes.
So naturally then there is a transition period when you bring a new plant home, and assuming you've checked the boxes off, assuming you've said, okay, I really want a fiddle leaf fig, and I know that they need several hours of bright direct light a day. So I've got this wonderful east facing window or this wonderful, southeast facing window. I'm going to put it in that window.
Yeah.
So you're setting yourself up for success because you've already evaluated your light availability, and that it is a responsible decision to get a fiddle leaf fig because you can support it.
You won't be necessarily wasting your money buying a plant that won't survive where you're trying to put it.
Exactly. If you live in a basement apartment and get very little light, you probably don't want to get that fiddle leaf fig.
Right.
But say that you are someone who has that southeast facing window or that, several hours of bright direct light kind of environment, you bring your plant home, it's still going to transition a little bit, right? It's still transitioning out of, well, hold on, I was, now I'm getting this kind of light, or, oh, the humidity is not as good here, or, oh, I'm recalibrating to this environment because it's really dry, so I need more water more often.
Yeah.
All of those different variables change as soon as we bring a plant home.
Yeah.
But I would say within 2 to 4 weeks, your plant should be adjusted.
Okay.
And if for that 2 to 4 week window, your plant is dropping lots of leaves or looks really sad or is really crispy and brown, something's not right. Right. Something, either the environment can't support that plant, or maybe it was overwatered or underwatered. A whole list of
There's a list of you have to go down the list and kind of check them off. Yeah,
absolutely.
That makes
sense.
But
yes, there is naturally a transition period when you bring a plant home from a nursery, as well as when you repot or uppot a new plant. There's also a transition period there too. Yeah.
Yes. And I have found that when I have brought plants home from a nursery, I don't know if this is necessary or not, but I've learned to just kind of not, I put them where I think they're going to go, or pretty close to where I plan to put them, but I don't try to repot them or do anything to them for a couple weeks usually, other than water them if they need it, because I feel like I'm going to shock it too much or something if I'm trying to do too many things at once. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but
I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you bring a plant home and you can see on the bottom of the nursery pot that the roots are super coiled and it's really, but I mean, that is less often than you would think.
Right.
So in general, I am in support of the plan that you just outlined. You bring a plant
I'm glad
home,
I'm on the right track.
Yes. You bring the plant home, you let it stay in its nursery pot and adjust to its new environment before you give it even more variables to adjust to, which that can be so stressful to uppot or repot and then move it to a new space and try to get all those things right. Then you don't know, if the plant's grumpy, which variable was it that made it grumpy?
True.
So one thing at a time is definitely the best way to go.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I want to get into what I'm assuming are a few of the more common, and I'm sure you know better than I do, but I'm guessing these are some of the more common reasons why people say they haven't brought plants into their space yet. And I'm guessing one thing that some people think about, maybe a lot of people think about, is that it's just going to be really expensive to get started. So what are I know that doesn't have to be true. So what would you normally tell somebody around that?
I would say that start small and then scale up, because what gets expensive is if you go and bananas at the nursery and buy 15 plants and you've never really had a plant before.
Right.
That's going to be a huge adjustment.
Yeah.
There's going to be a big learning curve there, trying to get to know all your different plants, all their different needs. Start small.
Yeah.
Pick a couple of plants that are, let's say, low maintenance, get a pothos and a cordatum and a ZZ plant, or, something like a monstera, things that are forgiving.
Okay.
Start there.
Yeah.
Because that's going to help you, A, get to know your plants, and B, it's going to build your confidence because you'll have fewer things to get wrong in theory.
Right.
The other thing I would say is, starting with varietals like that is more affordable than, say, someone who's like, I want this super rare plant and I'm going to pay $300 for a clipping of it on eBay.
Yeah.
Which to me, it's like plants, they propagate, you know what I mean? Plants you can make more
pretty
plants
quickly too, I think,
for free and for pretty quickly. So another great method, if you have a pal who has lots of plants, ask them, can I take a clipping of your philodendron?
Great.
Can I take a clipping of your monstera? Do the research to understand where you should clip from in order to propagate.
Right.
Do the crash course in propagation. But that's another really kind of affordable way to enter into plant parenthood is make some plants from scratch.
That's a great idea, because most of us know somebody that has a lot of plants. You know, there's somebody in everybody's world that has lots of plants, it seems like. So that's a great idea. I think a pothos is the only plant I had this one plant. I still have it to this day. I think I've had it for 15 years or something, but God bless it, because I did not know what I was doing when I bought it. And I, hung it in a hanging pot in my house. It was the only plant I had for many, many years. And I would bring fresh cut flowers in, but I'm talking about an actual plant that I'm taking care of. And my maintenance game was not strong, and I would not even water it as often as I should have. And I just would lose track, but it always stayed alive. Now it would start getting a little sparse looking at times. And I thought, oh, I have got to water that plant, so I would put water and it would do great for a few weeks or whatever. And then, this cycle was back and forth until finally, I always managed to hang it in a place that it was okay with. But I think pothos, like you said, they're pretty forgiving anyway, unless you're hanging it in maybe a super dark area or something. But now I've per your workshop, put some good soil together and potting soil, and also, have taken good care of it, and it's done incredible. But all these years later, it is still alive. It's just like
they're troopers. Pothos are troopers.
Really,
they really are,
and they're not expensive.
They're very
to buy
resilient.
Them. Yeah,
they're not expensive.
And you can get different leaf colors, right? Like the one I have is green, but now I have one that's green and white, which is really pretty.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are different varietals, so you could get a satin, or you could get a marble queen, which is yellow and green.
Yeah.
Satin pothos have like a silver kind of spread to them.
Oh yeah.
Or you could get a neon pothos, which is like a bright yellow green. There are all different kinds. So it's not like if you've only made pothos work for you, for those of you who are listening who are like, the only plant I haven't killed is pothos. The good news is there are lots of different
you could just get all different colors.
You can get all different kinds, and they all have, kind of the similar care instructions.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to go for some depth in a varietal versus breadth across many different plant varieties.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And it's funny what you were saying about not getting too many of the little baby starter plants at once. It's so smart, not only because, like you said, it gets expensive really quick, in that you go and you buy them, you think, oh, they're babies and they're only a couple dollars, $2 or $3 each at the nursery or wherever. And then you're like, okay, for $30, I got 10 plants. That's great. But then what you're not thinking about is you're going to have to do potting mix for all of those. You're going to have to buy pots, because they can't stay in those little pots. And then they're going to grow out of those tiny little pots fast. You're going to have to buy more pots. So there's like all these expenses to help it grow and
spirals.
Keep it. Yeah. So you're better to start with just a couple, one or two, and get that under your belt, so you understand the process and all of that before you start, and then bringing them on, and plus, like you said, the maintenance. You go from taking care of one plant or no plants to now taking care of 10 or 15 plants. It can be a lot. So,
and that's the biggest thing. I think that there's a lot of self-discovery in taking care of plants.
Yeah.
You might not know, especially as a new plant parent, you might not know what your appetite is for caring for plants, right? You might think, I really like how this alocasia looks. It's so beautiful. And then you bring it home and you realize, oh, it's kind of particular about its soil moisture levels. And oh, it's kind of particular about its humidity levels. And I'm not the kind of person who wants to be buying a humidifier for my plants or misting it, or,
yes,
you might be more of a succulent person, or you might be more of a hardy varietal, like a ZZ plant or a snake plant, very no muss, no fuss. So that's the other nice part about it, is you can kind of, if you start small, your trials and tribulations don't feel as great. than if you start huge and half your plants don't work out for you.
That is such a good point.
That can feel really devastating for someone who's learning to be a plant parent.
Yes, that is such a good point, because sometimes what we think is we're going to really enjoy and is going to be fun in theory, when we start doing it, we're like, yeah, I'm not as wild about this as I thought I might be, So
yes.
Yeah, you just don't know till you do it, right?
You don't know till you do it. And in addition to that, everything is trial and error.
Yeah.
I am a completely self-taught plant person.
Are you?
I don't have a degree in botany or agriculture. I'm self-taught. I have cared for plants for years. I have done a lot of my own learning and education and a lot of my own trial and error. I've had plants that have been sad. And so I've had to figure out, what do you need?
Yeah.
How do I tweak this? How do I make you happy? And it's through that we learn,
right.
So if you kill a plant, rest in peace plant. But if you kill a plant, that doesn't need to be the end of your journey.
No.
You just have to learn from that.
Yeah.
What was it about this plant that didn't work?
Yeah.
Or what was it about how I cared for it that didn't work? You roll that knowledge into care for your other plants or your next plant.
Yes.
Because I am a firm believer that anyone can have plants. There's no such thing as a green thumb. We can all do it as long as you have the patience to make it happen.
I agree. It's like anything else. We're just not magically good at it, right? We have to learn how to cook. We mess up all kinds of things when we learn how to cook. Yeah. And even when we know how to cook, we still mess things up sometimes. So,
exactly.
And like you said, taking care of a plant is you have to learn. And the only way you learn is by doing it. You can't think your way through that exercise. You have to actually get your hands onto the plant and into the dirt and really
you gotta get your hands dirty.
Put your thinking cap on to try to figure out, what's going right and what went wrong. And it's not hard. It's just repetition and practice. And I think probably, like you said, just listening to your intuition sometimes, because sometimes we just overthink things. And if a plant seems like it's not doing well, we probably don't have to think about it too hard to figure out, oh, it must not like where it's at. Or maybe look closely at the leaves. Maybe something's been eating it that I can't see from a distance. Or
what does
whatever.
The soil feel like? Ooh, it's super wet.
Right.
I watered a full week ago. I must have overwatered.
Right.
There's this process of elimination that can happen.
And then if you need to at that point you figure, okay, this doesn't seem right. Let me Google what this could mean or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, so that's fantastic. It's a learning process for sure. I'm still learning, but I love it. And I don't have so many that I have to spend a great deal of time. And I think that's the one thing I want to talk about too is, if people think it's too time consuming, if somebody say they had just 2 or 3 plants as an example, how much time do you really, once it's potted, once they're in place, how much time really is it taking each week maybe to care for them maintenance wise?
Depending on the size of the plants, it could be 10 minutes to 30 minutes. It is a really low
in a week
barrier to entry.
Yeah.
In a whole week, it's a low commitment. If you think about, if you have 3 plants, let's say you've got a pothos and you've got a monstera and you've got a ZZ plant. They all will need to be checked weekly to see if they're ready for water. Not all of them will need weekly waterings. For example, a ZZ plant might need water every 2 weeks. And once a month, you might say, okay, I'm giving all of my plants a wipe down and I'm going to clean all of their leaves this week.
Right.
But other than that, you're really just adding up the time it takes to go around, check the soil, give it a water.
Yeah.
That's 10 minutes.
And go ahead.
Yeah. It's 10 minutes. And then if we start getting into okay, once a month, wipe the leaves down. So maybe one week you spend 30 minutes instead of 10.
Right.
But it's not a huge commitment.
Yeah. And that makes a big difference, right? The wiping the leaves down helps them do their job better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's critical because if you think about a bookshelf in your home, once a month, if you run your fingers across that bookshelf, there's going to be dust.
Oh, yeah.
So that same dust is collecting on your plants. And when our plants collect dust like that, it makes it much more difficult for them to photosynthesize. It also can kind of become a breeding ground for pest issues. So I think that a best practice is at least once a month, making a little gentle solution, take a microfiber towel and wipe all of your leaves, front, back, top, bottom, just to just to make sure that you're not welcoming any kind of problems.
Right. Little bugs that want to set up camp or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, and also too, the one thing when you water them each week, are you supposed to, I'm assuming you're supposed to, if there's any like totally dead leaves or something, you want to pinch those off, right? Because isn't that can create pest problems or whatever too?
Yeah. I would certainly prune off leaves that are dead.
Yeah.
There are like two different camps of thought around it. Mm-hmm. Camp one would be wait till it's like super, super dead, mm-hmm. because the plant may be pulling nutrients from that dying limb.
Okay.
Camp number two, and I tend to fall a little bit more in this camp, mm-hmm. is if I see that my plant's got one really yellow leaf, mm-hmm. then I can easily kind of tug it off. Mm-hmm. I'm going to tug to pull it off, okay. because the plant itself is still trying to send nutrients to that leaf, okay. that limb.
Okay.
And the plant, that leaf is never coming back, right? Like mm-hmm. once it's super crispy and burned, or once it's yellow to brown to shriveled, right. it's not going to come back.
Okay.
So, in that case, I'm pruning it off so that the plant can redirect its energy toward the other healthier leaves, mm-hmm. toward the creation of new growth, and toward supporting an already healthy system, rather than just slowing down the somewhat inevitable death of,
okay.
My yellow leaf. Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to let those leaves go. That's just the way
exactly.
it is.
Yes, definitely prune off those yellow, brown, crispy, shriveled guys.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. That's what I've been trying to do that. So it's, but I'm always I'm glad you explained that, because I'm always a little like, is this dead enough for me to take this off? I'm just not sure. So you just give it a gentle little tug. If it comes off, fine. If not, just leave it alone for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Yay. All right. Well, so we talked a little bit about how everybody can, in fact, learn how to take care of plants properly. And if they're just willing to give it a little bit of time to do that. And so that is one of your specialties. And like I mentioned before, I went through a couple of your workshops. It was the early last year, your online workshops. And I imagine you got pretty busy with, I know you were doing a lot of them. I'm not sure now, but during the lockdown and stuff, there was a lot of them going on, which was so fantastic. But I think I took the Potting Soil 101 class. I'm going to have you talk about that in a minute. And then I took also the basic plant care or something like that. It was real basic stuff that I didn't, because I thought, you know what, I really do want, and see, here I was part of that group of people, right? I was just all of a sudden, I need to go get some plants. I didn't know where that was coming from, but obviously there was something happening. And then I came across your stuff and I thought, oh gosh, well, that's great. Because if I'm going to go spend, some money and I'm going to take the time, I want to try to understand what I'm supposed to do here, because I really never had a clue, to be honest. I just kind of winged it. So anyways, can you talk a little bit about your one-on-one consulting and then your workshops and what the difference is and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. The one-on-one consulting is, I really like to think of myself as a plant coach. Mm-hmm. So or plant therapist, kind of similar to that.
Can you talk to my plant? It's not doing well.
You might be having some plant problems at home. You might be somebody who is like, oh, I've had a plant before, but I want to get a couple more. And I don't need a full-on installation where you do it, Katlyn, but I really just need some guidance. Yeah. Those are all really excellent examples of when it makes sense to talk to a plant coach like mm-hmm. myself. And those one-on-one sessions are virtual. We hop on Zoom or FaceTime or whatever makes sense. Mm-hmm. And we talk about what it is, is that here's my plant. What's wrong with it? Why is it dying? We troubleshoot that.
Okay.
How do we fix it? Or maybe it's, hey, look at this this room that I have that I really want to put plants in. Where should I start? What should I consider?
Do they show you on video? Like, are you doing it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. That's where we flip the camera and we do a little tour. Nice. And I'll say, well, which cardinal direction does that window face? And Do you keep the blinds shut during the day? Do you keep them open? What level of plant care are you willing to commit to? We talk about all those things.
Sure.
And then that, you'd walk away with a list of, okay, these are the list of plants that I can go out and pick up and try for this space.
Mm-hmm.
So that the one-on-one consults are really excellent ways if you need kind of like one-off advice or one-off support for cultivating your plant parenthood skills or cultivating just a little bit more of a plantified space.
Okay, that's fantastic.
The workshops are really excellent for, corporate groups. I really love doing workshops for corporate groups.
Fun.
And over the course of lockdown, that was something that I found was really enjoyable, where I would work with corporate teams who were trying to, retain their talent.
Sure.
Corporate teams who were trying to support the health and wellness of their talent during a time when everyone was struggling.
Yes.
Everyone is struggling.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to be all of a sudden working from home and not leaving home.
Yes.
And that's a major lifestyle shift. So I really appreciated working with some of these corporate partners who have said, let's invest in our talent, let's invest in our team and do something that's interesting, that's going to help support their health and well-being.
I love it.
And that's when I would come in and put together kind of a custom curriculum for them. Maybe it's like, why houseplants and how do we pick them for your space?
Right.
Or how do you style with houseplants, or how do you care for houseplants? All of those things can be customized, but
that is
the
fantastic.
workshops are really great for, a larger, broader audience.
Sure.
Even a group like a bridal shower or a birthday party or something like that, where you want like a quick 30-minute, let's do this, let's talk about this.
Yeah, that's such a fun idea, really. Have a girls' night and, get everybody together, have some wine and some snacks and be like, hey, we're tuning into Katlyn now because she's going to teach us how to do this, that, and whatever. You can have the little supplies there and everybody can do a thing together. What fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I can send the list of materials in advance and you can have everything you need to do your own like potting DIY session. Or in the past, I have in the Seattle area done workshops for folks where I've put together those kits for them. And then we've all done a workshop together and talked through everything, making our own potting soil, our potting blend. And it's there's the educational piece is great. Learning about the benefits of plants is great. And then there's also this component of like working with our hands and getting our hands dirty.
So
that is
true.
Such a nice break for your brain when you're sitting in email and meetings all day with your team. It's a different way to bond as a team when you're stuck remote, when you're stuck virtual, right?
Yes.
It's not just we've been in hours of meetings all day. It's like, okay, let's do something not related to work.
That's right.
With our teams to kind of build that rapport, build that morale, and kind of boost the mood.
Oh, I love that. That's so fantastic. And what you just said about so many of us spend so much time on screens and, all day long, practically every day or almost every day. So many of us do. And to get off of the screen and go do something with your hands, whether it's art or working with plants, or it could be gardening outside. It could be, even just whether it's folding laundry, something with your hands that doesn't involve a screen is so incredibly healthy, and balancing and really,
Exactly. And that's why we see, art therapy classes or whatever that is, where we are, interacting with something physically. We're using a different part of our brain to do it.
Yeah.
And I absolutely think that part of your brain is what gets tapped into when you are potting a plant or when you are watering your plants or when you're cleaning your plant's leaves. Like it draws you into the present moment in a way that maybe you zone out when you're scrolling on your phone or when you're sitting in your 10th Zoom meeting of the day.
It's such a great mindfulness exercise for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep, and the great thing about, doing your workshops and things like that is that people are learning something that they can take and utilize for the rest of their life. Honestly, it's not just about we're having fun in this moment, which is great in and of itself and important, but it's like I'm learning something that I can actually like use for, forever going forward if I so choose, which is really fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is my hope.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, it's, your workshops are great, and I had fun doing the ones that I did.
Oh, good.
They were maybe an hour each, I think, or some hour and a half or something. And, it was fun. It was fun to be there live with some other people. And even though it was via virtual, not in person, which would be really fun too. But it was still fun because you did a good job of interacting with those of us that were watching and stuff, and taking our questions. A lot of us had questions, a lot of questions.
That's one of my favorite parts.
Yeah.
We'll do maybe like a 30 or 45-minute session, and then the last 15 minutes is all questions. And it's shocking how many people have questions.
Yes.
How many people want to talk about their plants or get more information about this specific plant problem.
Yeah.
And those are the parts that I love, because we're all in it together. All of a sudden we all realize, oh yes, I've had that plant problem before, and I'm not alone.
No, it's like we're all doing this together. Wonderful. I'll tell you what, you blew my mind when a couple things you talked about that I think people really, if they want to have plants, they really need to learn this information. And one was about up potting or changing pots or up potting. I didn't realize there was sort of like some rules of thumb and some things to think about before you just go, oh, I bought this cute pot and I'm going to throw this plant in the pot, and the pots could be any size, and the little tiny plant in this massive pot. Yeah. And, because somebody like me would think, oh, well, I won't have to repot it for 5 years. I'll put this little teeny plant in this massive pot.
And you are not alone in that mentality. Absolutely
Apparently you're not supposed to do it. Yeah.
No, I can't tell you how many clients, especially in like my one-on-ones, where they're like, oh, the plant was doing so great, and then I put it in this pot and it's angry. And I'm like, well, you took a plant in a 4-inch diameter pot and put it in a 10-inch diameter pot, and that overwhelmed the root system.
Right.
And so those are these like critical best practices that once we start getting that foundation, once we start learning some of those just really general things, we the level of our plant parenthood just, it all of a sudden soars.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I have had tremendous success with the plants that I have brought into the house since learning from you. And
good. That makes me so happy.
And the other one is the soil, because that was one thing I was always confused about. And again, when you go to, say, Home Depot or the nursery, wherever you go, and you go to see the soil section, let's face it, there are like millions of kinds of soil. And honestly, I never understood, and I can't be alone in this because I'm a relatively bright person, and yet I still somehow kind of went right over my head. But I never understood that potting soil, like it says potting soil on the bag, was specifically for potted plants. I think I at one point threw some of that into my garden outside, like thinking, and I didn't understand how is it different? Like, how is potting soil different? And then you kind of make your own mix, and you taught us to do that in the workshop, which was so exciting and fun. I mean, that sounds really nerdy to say about soil, and yet I was like super excited about it and mixed my own, just like you said, and it's been great. But potting soil, if you could explain that real quick before we'll wrap up here in a minute, but if you could explain how potting soil is different from like the garden soil or topsoil or whatever they call it that goes outside, because what will happen is people will buy these different bags, they'll have them in their garage, and then you just start picking and if you think they're all the same and they're all interchangeable, you can cause some real problems, and I have done that. So I can't be alone.
And no, you're not alone. Potting soil, I mean, it's comprised of a couple of different components. And if you are specifically trying to work with indoor houseplants, that's when we want to work with an indoor potting soil or a tropical plant potting soil.
Yes, okay.
And the reason is the soil itself, the composition is just favorable to tropical plants. So tropical plants like those that grow in Hawaii or Brazil, or, the potting soil for these tropical plants will then match the composition of the soil in which those plants grow in their native environments.
Okay.
Versus, now let's say you want to go do a project in your garden with some gardening soil, you probably want something that has some fertilizers in it. And like, you're going to need a different composition for that soil. It's probably going to be cut with maybe blood or fish guts, or you know what I mean? There's all kinds of different things.
Sand, maybe, even if it's
maybe sand, which is great for succulents. I introduce that when I'm working with succulents. But you don't necessarily need something that heavy duty inside your house for potting soil, and it can be a little stinky, quite honestly. So
good point.
Working with that tropical potting soil, that indoor plant potting soil as your base, and then cutting with it with a couple of different materials to improve drainage and aeration and those things are really going to set your plant's root system up for just a healthier environment. So it's going to be able to absorb moisture better. It's going to be less prone to overwatering and root rot as a result. So there are lots of different reasons to cut your potting soil with some materials to make your own blend. But starting with, for those indoor houseplants, starting with that indoor tropical houseplant soil, that is the best thing you can do from the jump off.
Okay. And pretty much, is it true that pretty much all the plants that are indoor plants basically kind of do originate from more tropical environments, because that's why they need the warmer climate indoors? Or is that my imagination?
No, I would say that for the most part, that's a really good way to generalize. Okay. That we can support these plants in our homes because our homes are climate controlled. We live in them. So we're typically not letting them get colder than 65 degrees, and tropical plants get fussy once it gets colder than 60 degrees because they're not used to those temperatures for prolonged periods of time. So when we're inside and we're creating this climate controlled environment, it's very conducive to having tropical plants. Now, not all tropical plants love being brought indoors, right? There are some plants that just truly need so much sun that living inside is never going to be their fullest life. There are other plants where, I don't typically work with like fruit trees or anything like that, because that's agriculture in my mind. Some people are like, I want a lemon tree in my house. And I'm like,
that's not my department.
Lemon trees want to live outside. And they want to live in Italy. And you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So, but with tropical plants, for the most part, they do a really great job of adapting to the indoor environment as long as they have the lighting conditions that they need to thrive.
And the humidity, like enough where you're spraying them.
And some need the humidity. Some don't, right? Like our succulents, they don't need humidity. Other plants like our pothos and our cordatums, they're not fussy if they don't have humidity. But as soon as we start talking about ferns, as soon as we're talking about alocasias, these plants that love high humidity environments, those are going to require a little extra love, a little extra TLC to keep happy.
Okay.
Ferns are another excellent example, which, we're in the Pacific Northwest, so we see them outside all the time. And then if you think about that, well, for 7 months of the year here, it's wet and clouds.
Yes. And that's when they really, that's when they're really big and full, and it is in the cooler weather. In the middle of the warmer part of the summer, they're not terribly impressive usually. Yeah.
And that should be an indicator for folks that my home environment is more like those summer months. Yes. It's like 70 degrees in here and it's dry, and ferns don't love that, so there's a little bit of we got to think about also what's best for the plant. And if you think you can keep up with the needs of a fern, for example, inside, it can be done. It can absolutely be done. It's just going to require more time investment on your part.
That makes sense. And now that you mention it, I guess I never really thought about it. Of course, I don't think I've gone on vacation for 2 weeks or more. But I think when people go on vacation, their tendency is to turn the heat off, I think a lot of times, or turn it way down, which is fine unless you have a bunch of plants that maybe you shouldn't turn it down below 60 or 65 if you want your plants to be alive when you come home.
Absolutely. I would say 60 would be the lowest I would ever go. For me, if I left, I would drop it to 65. And that would be, for me personally, what I would be comfortable with. You could probably get away with 60 for a week. After 2 weeks, the plants might be a little bit not so happy with you, especially if you live in a drafty home. But you can drop the heat down if you disappear for a while, but I wouldn't go lower than 60. And I truthfully am most comfortable with about 65.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know, because I imagine I will come across the need to do that. And I've never really thought about it, but now that I have a bunch of plants, I really need to be thinking about it. So
you're going to have to start thinking about like plant babysitters.
Yes, exactly. Can you just come through and water my plants, please? Yeah, exactly. Right. That's what you got to do. Well, have I forgotten anything? Is there anything you'd like to add before I'm going to have you here in a minute tell people how they can connect with you, the best place to do that. But is there anything else that we need to add to this, do you think?
I think we covered it.
We did pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I think that we made a good case as to why people should bring plants into their space, number one, from a health and wellness perspective, and then hopefully set them up to understand some things that they need to think about. And now they can come to you. How often are you running these workshops? And I know the consultations are always available, right? But I mean, you have to book them, of course. But what about the workshops?
Yeah, consultations available anytime. All you have to do is hop on my website and you'll be taken to my booking form, and you can pick any 30 to 60 minute window that you like for a one-on-one coaching session. Right now, I don't have any public workshops scheduled, but if you are interested in a private workshop, whether it's for a group of friends or it's the HR contact for your company and you want to bring something like that to your group, you can reach out to me anytime via email at helloplantsbyher@gmail.com.
Yep.
I also have a contact form on my website. I'm very responsive on Instagram, so you can find me there at plantsbyher, and website is plantsbyher.com. Basically, any variation of Plants by Her, and you will find me. I am her.
She is. For the longest time, I'm like, who is her? And then finally she posted a picture of herself on Instagram. I'm like, you need to post pictures of yourself more often.
I am the her.
You're the her. And your Instagram account is so much fun to follow because you're always posting beautiful pictures of plants and the environments in which you're going in and doing these installations and things and stuff. So it's fun. You're doing a great job over there. Well, thank you so much. This is exciting, and I can't wait to share it with everybody. And I think it's going to help some people that have been on the fence and thinking, I really want to do this, but I don't know where to start. And I think, that can be a problem. So I think we've solved that problem. What do you think?
I agree. And that's sometimes the hardest part is that first step. Sometimes the hardest part is just trying it. Yeah. And then once that happens, the momentum is there. And I think it becomes apparent really quickly that plants are for everybody. Yeah. So I hope that if you're, when you're listening to this, you realize that you are capable of taking care of plants and you might need a little support. We all need a little support at times. And so, there are resources for that. I'm a resource for that. There are lovely plant people in the world and in the internet who can make the plant parenthood journey totally accessible. Yes. So come and find me if you have any hesitancy or reservation. Come and find me. My mission in life is to prove to everyone that they can be a plant person and they can have plants.
Yes, so, absolutely. That's so wonderful. Well, yes, go find her because she's a sweetheart and she knows what she's talking about. So she will help you out. All right, Katlyn. Well, thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Stacy. It was so lovely talking with you.
Oh, you're welcome.